Welcome to Why America, the series where we dive deep into pivotal moments that have shaped the course of American history and its global interactions. In this episode, we unravel one of the most perilous standoffs of the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's explore the events that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war and how it was narrowly averted. To understand the Cuban Missile Crisis, it's essential to grasp the geopolitical landscape of the Cold War. Post-World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers with conflicting ideologies, capitalism versus communism. This rivalry led to an arms race, espionage, and numerous proxy wars, creating a tense global atmosphere. Bay of Pigs invasion. In April 1961, the United States backed an invasion by Cuban exiles at the Bay of Pigs, aiming to overthrow Fidel Castro's communist regime. The invasion failed spectacularly, strengthening Castro's ties with the Soviet Union and heightening Cold War tensions. John F. Kennedy. As the 35th President of the United States, Kennedy faced significant challenges, including the Bay of Pigs fiasco and the construction of the Berlin Wall. His leadership during the Cuban Missile Crisis was crucial in navigating the delicate situation. Nikita Khrushchev, the premier of the Soviet Union, Khrushchev sought to leverage Cuba's proximity to the United States to counter U.S. missiles in Turkey and to deter another invasion of Cuba. His decision to place nuclear missiles in Cuba was a strategic move to shift the balance of power. Fidel Castro, the revolutionary leader of Cuba, Castro aligned with the Soviet Union to protect his regime from further U.S. aggression. The presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba was both a deterrent and a statement of defiance against the United States. The discovery of the missiles. Soviet missiles in Cuba. In mid-1962, the Soviet Union began shipping ballistic missiles to Cuba, secretly constructing launch sites. These missiles, capable of reaching much of the United States, posed a severe threat to American national security. U-2 reconnaissance flights. On October 14, 1962, a U-2 spy plane captured photographs of Soviet missile installations in Cuba. These images were analyzed and confirmed the presence of medium-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles. Kennedy's immediate reaction? Upon receiving the intelligence, Kennedy convened the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, ex-COMEM, to assess the situation and formulate a response. The discovery of the missiles marked the beginning of the most dangerous phase of the Cold War. U.S. response options, military options. Ex-COMEM considered several military responses, including airstrikes to destroy the missile sites and a full-scale invasion of Cuba. These options risked a direct military confrontation with the Soviet Union, potentially escalating to nuclear war. Diplomatic measures. Diplomatic solutions included negotiations with the Soviet Union to secure the removal of the missiles in exchange for U.S. concessions. Here is a recorded telephone conversation between President Kennedy and former President Eisenhower discussing the potential trade with the Turkish missiles.
We got, Friday night, got a message from Khrushchev, which said that he would withdraw these missiles and technicians and so on, providing we did not plan to invade Cuba. We then got a message, that public one, the next morning, in which he said he would do that if we withdrew our missiles from Turkey.
However, the urgency of the threat required a more immediate action to prevent further missile deliveries. Naval blockade, quarantine. Kennedy decided on a naval blockade, termed a quarantine, to prevent additional Soviet military shipments to Cuba.
The United States answer to what Adlai Stevenson termed Soviet blackmail in Cuba was a quarantine of all offensive weapons being shipped from Russia to that island fortress. The U.S. threw up a...
This action aimed to buy time for diplomatic efforts and demonstrate U.S. resolve without provoking an immediate military conflict. Kennedy's public address, televised speech. On October 22, 1962, Kennedy addressed the nation, revealing the presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba. He announced the establishment of a naval quarantine around the island and called for the removal of the missiles.
I have directed that the following initial steps be taken immediately. First, to halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back.
International and domestic reactions. Kennedy's speech had a profound impact, rallying American public support and alerting the international community to the grave danger. Allies expressed solidarity while the Soviet Union denounced the blockade as an act of aggression. The naval blockade and diplomatic efforts enforcing the quarantine. U.S. Navy ships established a blockade line around Cuba, monitoring and intercepting Soviet vessels. The first significant test came on October 24th, when Soviet ships approached the quarantine line. After tense moments, the Soviet vessels turned back, avoiding direct confrontation. Back-channel communications. Behind the scenes, intense negotiations took place between the U.S. and Soviet Union. Robert Kennedy, the president's brother and attorney general, played a crucial role in these back-channel communications with Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrinin. UN involvement. The United Nations also became a stage for the crisis, with U.S. Ambassador Adlai Stevenson presenting evidence of the missile sites at a Security Council meeting, further isolating the Soviet position. Resolution of the crisis. Khrushchev's proposal. On October 26th, Khrushchev sent a message to Kennedy proposing the removal of Soviet missiles in exchange for a U.S. pledge not to invade Cuba. The following day, he added a demand for the removal of U.S. missiles in Turkey. Kennedy's response. Kennedy publicly accepted the first proposal, but privately agreed to the removal of U.S. Jupiter missiles from Turkey, which was not to be disclosed publicly as part of the deal. This compromise allowed both sides to claim victory while avoiding nuclear war. Announcement of agreement. On October 28th, Khrushchev announced the dismantling of the missile sites in Cuba. U.S. reconnaissance flights confirmed the removal of the missiles, and the quarantine was lifted on November 20th. Immediate consequences. The resolution of the crisis marked a significant de-escalation in U.S.-Soviet tensions. However, it had political repercussions for both leaders. Kennedy emerged stronger, while Khrushchev faced criticism within the Soviet Union, contributing to his eventual ouster in 1964. Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. The crisis led to renewed efforts to control nuclear arms, culminating in the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963, which prohibited nuclear tests in the atmosphere, outer space, and underwater. Hotline Agreement, a direct communication link between Washington and Moscow, known as the Hotline, was established to allow for immediate and direct communication between the superpowers, reducing the risk of accidental war. Shift in Cold War dynamics. The Cuban Missile Crisis profoundly impacted the Cold War, demonstrating the catastrophic potential of nuclear weapons and leading to a more cautious approach in U.S.-Soviet relations. It underscored the importance of diplomacy and crisis management in preventing global conflicts. Key insights and legacy, diplomacy, and crisis management. The crisis highlighted the critical role of diplomacy and the importance of effective communication in resolving international disputes. It served as a lesson in the dangers of nuclear brinkmanship and the necessity of measured responses. Enduring relevance. The Cuban Missile Crisis remains a pivotal event in modern history, shaping the strategies and policies of nuclear-armed states. It continues to be studied as a case of successful crisis management and a warning of the risks associated with nuclear weapons. Conclusion? The Cuban Missile Crisis stands as a stark reminder of how close the world came to nuclear catastrophe and the delicate balance of power that defined the Cold War era. It exemplifies the importance of leadership, diplomacy, and the willingness to find peaceful resolutions to conflicts. Join us next time on Why America as we explore more moments that have shaped the nation's history and its role on the global stage.